Okay. So this is something that's been on everybody's mind if they saw the Batman and ever saw the Dark Knight. We wanted to take a little bit of time and compare the two of these because there were an astounding number of similarities, but there's also, I think, I don't know. What would you say is the reason we did this, Dan? You're a huge Dark Knight fan.
It's his favorite film.
Yeah,
We
well,
need to
it
say
was
it.
my idea for the segment. I'm gonna take the credit to my detriment, if that, because I went into the Batman when it came out in theaters, and I watched it keeping, as I now realize, my Dark Knight glasses on, because I was expecting the Batman to be, or hoping for it to be, as good, if not better, than the Dark Knight, right? And I was trying to draw parallels and stuff rather than looking at the Batman on its own merits. And I sort of paid the price because I had a relatively bad experience watching the Batman. I think you guys might remember
Right.
I ragged on the movie quite a bit. But then it dropped on HBO Max this past week, and I watched it again, and without any preconceptions, and I think I had a much better time with it. However, watched The Dark Knight, and I could still tell you I still like The Dark Knight better, but at the same time, I like the Batman for what it is. So that's the reason why I wanted to talk about this. And I guess I'm itching to hear what you guys think about that.
I thought we were doing it because it was like two very realistic versions of Batman and kind of comparing it.
Yeah.
I guess everybody has their own opinion. It doesn't
No, I
really...
mean, I think it's one versus the other. You can make
Yeah.
any comparison you'd like. I think it's taken in whatever direction you guys would like to take it.
Well, has anybody I didn't rewatch all of the Batman, but I did rewatch some scenes. Did you guys have like a different view on things?
I
mean, did you
left the
rewatch it
Batman.
all?
I rewatched The Dark Knight because I thought I still had a good idea of what the Batman was about, and I think it's what you guys said. I let it marinate in my head,
Yeah.
and yeah, I have a different impression. Sure.
When
Andrew?
when I saw the Batman, I hadn't seen the Dark Knight, and when I watched it, I was really the Batman. When I watched that, I thought uh, I just wasn't super compelled by it. And when I did watch the Dark Knight this week, I loved it. I saw it, and it was like this is
Yay!
this yeah. Well, this is a movie that
Woo!
really
I'm
it,
sorry.
Chris Nolan really he honors all of the characters, and we see a Gotham City that isn't a parody of a city. It's like everything is given the gravity and realism of an action movie, and everything about Batman. It's not fantasy, and I don't think you're going to beat Michael Caine and Morgan Freeman. I really don't think you're going to beat what's his oh my gosh,
Heath Ledger.
Heath Ledger's Joker, but also Batman. Why am I blanking today?
Christian
Bale.
Bale.
Christian Bale. Like
Yeah.
he was incredible. Everything was incredible in that. And I'm not huge into action sequences, but every sequence had a reason and a purpose, and everything that happened was, it was organic and it was grounded in reality. And I didn't feel like I was watching a movie so much. With the Batman, I felt like I was watching a bunch of kids play Batman. And it just didn't have the same effect. I also think, there's some direct shots that feel like they were taken straight out of the Dark Knight. I feel like some of the characterizations were taken out of the Dark Knight, and the voices, and I think it's impossible not to try to compare them. And I think just the existence of the second one validates how good the Dark Knight really is.
I'm
That's
gonna
my
just suggest this.
analysis.
This is, I don't know if you guys know about this, but if you've listened to the soundtrack, there's pieces of the soundtrack that are literally pulled from the Dark Knight trilogy. Like
Really?
there's a part where it's this like metronome kind of music that's picking up, and it's like a beat, and it's basically the same thing as Gotham's Reckoning from The Dark Knight Rises, where Bane is like coming up and
Yeah.
like get this taking over the city. And in this movie, they play it around the time where Catwoman and Batman are talking on the rooftop before they go and try to, like, in the third act, before like she goes to try to kill Falcone. Spoiler alert. But so there's a lot of influences, and I think a lot of the plot points are sort of
S-
follow this
Just
similar.
speaking of
yeah.
music, I strongly recommend you guys going to see Hans Zimmer live if you
Mm.
haven't so
Yeah.
far. The
Fantastic.
way like the Dark Knight being played live is just, it's still to this day one of my most incredible experiences. So
Wow.
definitely make sure to get tickets for Hans Zimmer live. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm
Roland.
so like
No,
just
go ahead, sorry,
really
miss.
quickly, it's Andrew, can you like sort of understand me and Dan feeling disappointed after we watched? And no, Roland, actually you liked it, but like, do you remember we were so disappointed because we were expecting something better than Dark Knight? So
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I was looking at that and I was just, it was sort of a step backwards because we went from, Michael Keaton Batman and George Clooney, which was
Yeah.
sort of an updated Adam West Batman, which is cartoony and light and campy, to super realistic, grounded in reality Dark Knight trilogy. It felt like we went back into a genre type film, but again, it was self-serious as opposed to grounded, and that's the distinction I draw between the two. And I think if you were gonna do something stylistic, if you were gonna really make a statement and reinvent Batman, I would have preferred to see you go balls to the wall with something brand new. Also interesting that none of this discussion includes the Ben Affleck Batman. Just to put that out there.
He just kind of like
Well-
came and went in the middle there. Yeah.
I mean,
And Roland, what about you? You watched the Batman, right? Because I honestly cannot
Yeah.
remember.
First of all, I like Ben Affleck Batman. I'm not going to get into it. I've been
Okay.
I love it too.
No
Warner
judgment.
Brothers was garbage. Anyways, what are we talking about? Yes, Batman, Dark Knight. So when I watched the Batman, I liked it. There was too many confusing things to me, like too many themes that were going in and out, way too long. I had some problems with it. And then I watched The Dark Knight, the masterpiece, and it was ruined for me because of college humor. I don't know if anybody remembers The Bad
Yeah.
Man, where
Yeah.
Pete Holmes
Oh.
plays Batman, but that's all I could think about every time Christian Bale talked as Batman, and it ruined it. It's a great movie. Heath
Oh,
Ledger
come
was
on.
frightening. He was calculating. Every time Christian Bale came up, I could only see Pete Holmes.
I mean,
Too
that's
bad.
but that's I
And it was
feel like I
crazy
blame
because
you
it's
for that.
such
That's
a
not the
realistic
Batman's
movie.
fault, because if you remember watching Batman Begins even, and he's like, "Swear to me," I'm like,
Yeah.
there's a
No.
it works for me. I mean, the voice. But here's the thing: Christopher Nolan has kind of taken a lot of criticism over the years with how he mixes audio in his movies, and dialogue is like often hard to hear. With like even the Bane thing, or like he's like, I don't care if it's harder to hear, but I want to realistically portray how Bane would sound if he was wearing that
Yeah.
in real life. And
Yeah.
sometimes people are like, it's to the detriment of you being able to understand what's happening in the movie.
Yeah.
Sometimes the
works.
dialogue doesn't inform what's happening though. Sometimes it's really just
Yeah.
like, maybe sometimes garbled dialogue is more the point than the dialogue itself.
It makes it a
Exactly.
little more imperfect and therefore a little
Yeah.
more realistic. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And sometimes
Yeah.
I feel like people miss that. Like a lot of times they're like, we need to understand every single word that's being said. I'm like, sometimes you don't. Like the filmmaker does this on purpose. They're like, you're meant to just get the gist of it, and that's enough for you to understand what's happening. You know, that's kind of like what we talked about in Coda. I mean, that's one of those movies where you actually have to pay attention, because you can't just put it on in the background and expect to know the story as it plays out, because a lot of
Yeah.
it is signed in the movie. So, but at the same time, there's parts of the movie where you're just like, I get it. I don't have to understand exactly what they're saying. Like if you turn the subtitles off, you can still understand what's going on. And
Yeah.
with Christopher Nolan movies, I feel like sometimes that's the case. He's great at showing and not telling. And I think in the Batman,
As a good
sometimes he does that.
filmmaker should,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Um, I think when we did watch Koi Milgia, I watched it without subtitles, and I got a real sense because the action was so clear and the shots were very clear in their communication of what was going on. That's maybe the problem with a noir Batman, where it's like everything's dark and most of these are style shots. One of the other things that I really liked about The Dark Knight, in grounding it in realism, the Batmobile makes so much more sense as an armored car. It's like everything about it is just
And the
yeah,
scooter, right?
everything.
How
everything.
cool was that?
Versus
that was one of my favorite things when they
every
just
other
changes into
Batman,
scooter.
every other Batmobile is like it's either like a really nice souped up, you know, latest model of something you can drive and it's a car advertisement, or it's a big cartoony, you know, thing with wings and like, but like we see that and it's like, yeah, he's gonna ram through stuff in that, and it's got to be bulletproof.
Watch the trilogy. You should
I'm gonna
definitely
have
see
to now.
It's called the
how
Tumbler.
The car tumbler.
Yeah.
I will say The Dark Knight was Christopher Nolan did such a great job of making it realistic. I mean, Gotham itself felt like it was in Charlotte, which is the closest city towards me. It felt like a very real place.
Yeah.
And I think because of that, and guys might think I'm wrong for it, but I think it kind of takes away the character from Batman. Like it seems too real, but with the Batman, it was a very stylized, you know, the villains seemed to be kind of in on the joke. It was dark and gritty, and I like the emo Bruce. It was, you know, if we're thinking down to it, we're still rooting for a guy who's dressed like a bat jumping across.
Exactly.
True.
We have to have a little bit of, you know, self-aware craziness.
Well, I think the realism of The Dark Knight is what made it the great movie that it was. It's, you know, we could take Batman seriously. And for those years we did. Like that voice, that even the shots, everything is so everything feels like it could be happening in the city right across the for me, the valley. You know, it's we are dragged into such parody in other Batmans, and you know, even the way that the geography makes sense. You know, you get a sense of how the city's put together in The Dark Knight. In everything else, Gotham feels like a green screen, or it feels like you know, a board game.
They did a lot of stagecraft and stuff in this, where they were just like LEDs with ILM, and they did a lot of the exteriors rather than on location in a studio.
But going back to also what Roland said, so do you reckon it's exactly that we kind of figured out why The Dark Knight works? Because Nolan decided to spend, Dan, do you always have to go like close up onto me? Can we go back to 4 boxes? Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Sorry.
Because he did focus on the details. He essentially took away from like Christian Bale, the Batman was not the center of the attention. We had Harvey Dent, we had the Joker, we had Alfred, we had Morgan Freeman. We had so many little stories that there was enough happening for us to take essentially
I forgot my favorite part.
Take our attention of Batman. But yeah, what's your favorite part?
Sonar. The sonar with the cell phone signals. Like, first of all, one of my big problems with Batman is like, why does it matter? Why do bats matter at all? Because the original Batman was blind and was like supposed to be like a bat. And there's never like for just about this is why I can't, like, I know why Spider-Man is Spider-Man. He was bitten by a spider. He acts like a spider. He crawls around. Batman could be wearing anything, and there's really no reason for him to be a bat. But with this,
he was afraid of bats.
Who cares? That's like, I'm afraid of clowns. Does that make me Clown Man? No. But it's like when you could use sonar and suddenly he's operating like a bat, and it was also such clever science fiction that, you know, you can they explain the concept. It is fiction. It couldn't really happen that way, but with somebody with Bruce Wayne's resources and the intelligence that would go into constructing something like that, put that all together with the fact that it's harkening back to the idea of a bat and how a bat
Mhm.
would find trouble or escape it.
Yeah.
I
But
thought
that's
that
the
was
brothers.
brilliant.
That's Jonathan Nolan and Chris Nolan at its best. They just both incredible. I don't know if you've seen Westworld.
Mm-hmm. First
I
season.
don't know if you think about it, but that's like the essentially attention to details when it comes about to storytelling. I think they really are masters of their craft.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, those
Um,
guys, that's the biggest part. That's the biggest thing about this movie that I should say the Batman that bothered me, right? Because the Batman as a movie is one where whether it's like look, okay, so it takes creative liberties with a lot of stuff like realism. Yeah, the car is probably the most realistic Batmobile we've had since the 60s. Like it looks like a car that you could drive on the road. Whereas a Tumbler, even they could drive it. It was actually drivable, but it wasn't quite the same as what you saw in the Batman. It's like a muscle car. But
Yeah.
but like the script, like the way the story was told, I felt like some of that was lacking. Like with the Dark Knight, like you could tell like there's the bat sonar, like they had such a finesse, like they had such apt like command of the script and of the story. And then like you said, Mags, it's in the Dark Knight, Batman is more than just one person trying to take down, like trying to solve the issue of crime in Gotham City. He's part of a bigger system. He's part of a
yeah.
city. And you can like in the Batman they
spotlight's
keep
off
saying,
him.
sorry.
Yeah. The
Yeah,
spotlight's off him.
yeah,
Like
exactly.
weirdly. Yeah.
Whereas in the Batman, they keep saying, yeah, in the Batman, you can argue, sure, you can make an argument that that Gotham City is a character in the movie. However, it's a character in as much as like production design as anything else. It's not really when you go beyond production design and the fact that Batman, it's like a physical obstacle for Batman in many cases. It's not a character anywhere beyond that. Whereas in the Dark Knight, like the city is a character not because it's just the buildings and the people, like you see as like the guys in the leading up to the sequence where you have the cop who's got one of his loved ones in the hospital, and you could see like Gordon gets a message saying, hey, watch out for like X
But
cop, whatever the name of the cop is.
But
And
here's a counter argument that can
yeah,
actually explain. So we forget that The Dark Knight is part of a trilogy. We had the first film to establish things that the Batman only had, 90 minutes, 120 minutes to sort of establish.
yeah,
We did get to know the Batman, Chris Bale in the first one. That's why we didn't need to spend awful amount of time on that. Whereas here, yeah, perhaps that's something to consider in a favor of the Batman.
yeah. I could see that because it's sort of unfair to compare the second movie in a trilogy to the first. I mean, but hey, look, when the producer of the movie says we're trying to beat the Dark Knight, even if they say it in jest,
Did he say that?
yeah, Dylan Clark, who's like the producing partner for Matt Reeves on the movie, and he's like
Oh,
produced a lot of Matt Reeves movies.
jeez.
He said we're
Damn.
trying to like I
Yeah.
don't know if he said it in jest, but he mentioned as much as like, hey, we're trying to outdo the the Dark Knight, and it was a rallying cry for them, if not anything else. But and I'll be honest, I think on its own merits, the Batman is a great movie. It is a great movie. It's very methodically paced, and I think if you go into it and not expecting anything else but what it gives you, it's a good film, and it's something you can. The 3 hours go by pretty quickly. I've watched it twice, and I've never felt like it was too long, or it was
I
dragging
disagree.
at any point.
There's
Me
so much.
too.
Oh really?
I would like if there's going to be more the Batmans, I think I'd like them to go further, lean harder into their style, and establish its own voice. I'm not writing it off. I think that they could turn it into something really good. But comparing these two, which you know, you can't help
the
but do,
style,
especially when they put it in there that they're going to try
stated
and beat it.
style, Andrew, like, what do you mean by the style? Because they meant to
Well,
be dark, but didn't you think? I still think the Dark Knight was darker.
well, I mean, visually dark.
Thematically, I think the Batman is darker visually. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. I think the actual voice and the tone of the Batman wasn't as clear as the tone of the Dark Knight. Dark Knight lets you know right from the beginning, this is real life, you know, and these are real people. I don't know exactly what I was watching in the Batman. It just felt like, yeah, we know Batman. We're gonna treat this. You know, he's younger in this one. He goes to clubs. There's Catwoman. There was a lot less cohesion in the Batman, I feel, and with a grittier Riddler, with Paul Dano playing him, which again, I want to give him a fair shot at really going full Riddler, but we could have seen, if you were going to take the step back into stylized, less realistic Batman, give us some wacky costumes, give us a little bit of character quirks, show us how this is going to be different than the Dark Knight. Don't try to recreate it.
It was the Edward Cullen we never got. The darker one.
Hey, by the way, guys.
Sorry.
All right, this shot reminds me of something, right? Like this shot, I don't think we see this shot in the movie in The Dark Knight. But let's talk about the Joker for a second. The two principal antagonists of each movie. Heath Ledger's Joker is iconic. Like, we know this. And there's a scene in the new movie, The Batman, where Riddler's sitting in the backseat and he's basically like, you know, he catches the DA and he tapes him up and all that stuff. How did you feel about the performances of like the two antagonists in this movie? Like, what did you think about those guys?
Originally I just enjoyed Paul Dano. But then having watched The Dark Knight, I was like, some of this is taken from the Heath Ledger performance. Some of this
interrogation,
like the live stream.
Yeah, and I think if we're, I don't know, sometimes crazy just feels like a flavor that everybody knows, and I like to see nuance in insanity, and Heath Ledger gave us something new and different. I felt like we were getting a little bit of rehash with the performance. I'd like to see more into the soft-spoken side of Riddler. That was what was compelling about him, is this, like, you know, they kind of brand him as like an incel on one of those chat forums. He's just like upset with everything, and you know, his theories are quietly typed to his followers as opposed to boldly projected and on a terrorist tape, which is what we get with Heath Ledger.
But
can I ask you guys something just really quickly? So Dan, because I will never get a chance like this, what is the the Dark Knight's Joker's actual story with the scars? Because he gives us multiple versions of the story, how he got the scars. What is the actual deal with that?
Well, there isn't one. I don't think there is one.
To himself, so it's never answered in any shape or form.
I mean, didn't they do like a book version of it that Christopher Nolan approved, or am I crazy for thinking that?
I don't think so.
Are you crazy?
It's
insanity speaking to you.
I do know that they released some information about the Joker and said that in The Dark Knight Rises he just stays in Arkham the entire time because they were going to include Heath Ledger, but of course due to circumstances they couldn't. But I don't think they ever really reveal it. I always just kind of assume that it's him doing it to himself and then coming up with an explanation, possibly not knowing, but also to kind of keep that suspense about himself.
Right.
Because, I mean, at the very first scene, you know, he's put this crew together, but they don't know what the Joker looks like.
Brilliant.
So another way of showing like he's never going to show his true self.
And I have to say, like, that's the part where the Joker trumps every other card as far as comic book movie villains go. Even if Marvel fans will
Yeah.
say Thanos, I'm like, look,
You can't
there's
beat
no
this writing.
villain that is
Yeah.
as layered, if not more layered, than the lead protagonist or superhero of any comic book based movie ever. Because
And
Heath Ledger's character is his actions are the antithesis of what he preaches in every part of the movie, and the brilliance behind, like, he is always the smartest guy in the room, and yet he will convince you otherwise no matter what you say, and he's very good at like convincing, and that to
didn't
me
he
is
lock
the conceit of a
himself in
great
the?
villain. Go ahead.
Didn't he lock himself in the room, Dan, also to like prep for this role, or was that just
Well,
like
yeah,
a?
the method acting, yeah, I mean, he did. It's kind of controversial, the whole concept of method acting in general, like whether it's actually real, it's working. There's people who have said, like, method acting is, it's sort of an excuse for people to get away with whatever they want to get away with. But I mean, I don't remember hearing any stories necessarily about Heath Ledger taking advantage of it's more recently you hear that about like Jared Leto. He method acted his way through Morbius apparently, and people were like,
And the Joker, did he not?
yeah, apparently, yeah, he
Yeah.
sent
And
like
House
some
of
very
Gucci.
bad
Yeah.
like presents to cast members in the mail, and it was just some nasty stuff, and he was just like, hey, I'm the Joker, like, this
That's
gift
the
is not from
thing.
Jared, it's from the Joker.
Everything from the Dark Knight, which I think is, it's like one of the undisputed best superhero movies that we've seen in the last couple of decades. It's because it doesn't try to be a superhero movie, but it's the gold standard, and you can't help but see its influence in every single iteration of Batman since. It's gritty, but some people take the grittiness and make it too dark, and some people see the realism and make it, a little too real. That's where I think they went too far with the Riddler, but this is, I'll say it again, it's the gold standard for movies, and I think it's what other I think it's what other superhero movies have tried to be and have come up short.
I'm so glad you agree, Andrew.
Eh,
Like, there's
it was
you're
you're right to love this
Dan?
movie.
I'm so happy because I was like, if Andrew comes into this and says like, I don't know
I hate it.
what all the hub is about the Dark
No,
Knight,
no,
and I'll be
no,
like,
no. And you know what? I
sorry.
avoided it for a long time because I was like, okay, it's clearly overhyped. I'm glad I
Yeah.
waited this long to see it because I was totally sucked in by the
Yeah.
opening sequence with the Joker and all of his henchmen. I was like, this is,
Yeah.
it was fine. It wasn't spoon feeding you everything. It was keeping me guessing. It was
Introducing it,
compelling.
yeah.
It was weird. It was like I was in
Show, don't
suspense
tell.
from,
Yeah.
yeah,
Perfect.
it was great. So yeah, I absolutely agree with you. It's a fantastic movie.
Yeah, it's still to this day, I think one of if not the best opening sequence to not just a superhero movie, but one of the best to any movie anywhere
Yeah.
of all time. It's
Yeah.
literally, I would put it up there with, you give me an example and I'll say yes, it's better than Citizen Kane starting sequence, or better than the Goodfellas long shot, or like whatever you want to put up against it. I would say it's up there.
And
It's
people try to recreate it. I cannot think of films, but I'm like, every single time I see something familiar, I'm like, oh, that's the Dark Knight ripoff. They've done it. You
Yeah.
can't beat it. Yeah, they were
I-
first to open the film like that, I think.
My bottom line on this is, if Christopher Nolan does do the Ace Ventura movie, I am so there. I would
Yes.
love to see it. I
Let's
really
start
like
petition.
totally on the same page as Jim Carrey here. Yeah, that would absolutely need to happen.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Well, I think that's pretty much it for that.